with practiced as an attorney, as a municipal law attorney for 25 years in Washington County. I am not admitted to practice in the state of Massachusetts, nor have I ever threatened to sue anyone with respect to this matter, or I think any matter, with respect to the town of Nantucket, or any individual person in the town of Nantucket. So I just want to correct that misinformation.
Thanks. Okay, anything else from the public? Okay, thanks everybody. Okay, so we'll go on to the public hearing notices of intent. And the following are continued SPPF Baxter Road area, the revetment project is continued to August 20th. And the Nantucket Islands Land Bank at 17 and 19 North Liberty Street and 8 Wesco Place is also continued to August 20th. And the Lily Pond Realty Trust at 27, 29, and 31 North Liberty Street, all three of those are continued to August 6th. If there's anybody here to comment on those topics that will not be able to come back at their hearing date, we can hear you now. And Mr. Raghavan.
I will be here on the hearing date, but I was hoping with regards to SPPF that this commission would consider closing that administratively. It's been, the last time you heard evidence on that was in September, so it's been 10 months. You've lost most, I think you have maybe 4 commissioners who can continue hearing it, and I'm not even sure that all 4 of you have been here, haven't missed, I think one commissioner may have missed 2 meetings. So aside from a quorum issue, it's so far back that I doubt whether anybody can have a clear recollection of what you heard anyway. I've been pretty involved in this, and I don't, and it's going to have to start, I mean, so much of it's going to have to be reopened and redone, and there were so many outstanding questions that needed answers that were just held in abeyance. So there's the longevity part of it regarding memory and whatnot. And then the last reason would be if somebody files a new notice, they're required to file an abutters list that's less than 6 months old. Because, I mean, a new notice of intent, because you need to, there's a requirement that you notify the public and abutters and whatnot that you're having these hearings. And the reason there's a time frame on that is because properties move and people move and whatnot. So this has been actually continued now for almost twice as long as the stale date on an abutters list. So you have no idea whether there's people who purchased property who are affected at this point who know or don't know about this hearing going on.
That's a good point. But do we have the option to close the hearing, or only the applicant can close one?
Well, we certainly can. They've requested a continuance. I know I've been speaking with the applicant in this case about withdrawing or allowing us to close. They've asked for continuance for what they want to do, and I think that for us is a pretty fair drop-dead date for them to decide what they want.
That'll be 11 months then, and so can we just try to make, we'll just make a decision?
Yeah, it's the discussion that we've had with them, and they're trying to decide whether they want to simply withdraw or we could close the hearing and essentially.
And it's fair for them to be here if we're going to close that hearing.
Correct.
We could give them a warning to say we need,
We need to have some.
we need to have a decision or something.
Like 3. You said 3.
We do have a quorum issue with that one. So
We do have a
we
quorum
can't
issue.
actually meet. We can meet quorum on that still, but it's pretty close.
Yeah. No,
There's not a lot of margin for error. So I've spoken to their representative, and we've kind of set that date as the determining where we're going to be.
Okay. So let's go on to the notices here. Town of Nantucket, DPW at 188 Nantucket Road.
Can I not sit on this one?
You were not on this one, but the others are. So this is the one that we continued last time. That's the invasive species because we didn't have a quorum for this. So we only had 3 commissioners.
Oh, okay.
This is for the invasive species removal, the Phragmites removal on Long Pond. We had all the information last time. We didn't have any questions for last time. We were just waiting for the file number from 2 meetings ago. We had it. We just didn't make a quorum.
Okay, before we close this, though, I drove by there late last week, and we didn't stop and look closely, but I'm pretty sure I saw some purple loosestrife in there too, right on the side of the bridge there.
I actually haven't seen that, but as long as Bruce is in there.
Might as well
Yeah, exactly.
Might as well, you can add that to the order that they could, because I've heard many cases where people go in and treat phragmites, and the next thing they see is a bunch of loose stroke. So if it's already in there, might as well work on it.
It's blooming right now, right?
Yeah.
I saw it somewhere the other day.
Yeah. Okay, so you guys are ready to close?
Yes.
Okay, do I have a motion to close?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that motion carries. And, okay. Then we go to the land bank, 158 Orange Street.
Thank you. For the record, Paul Santos with Nantucket Surveyors representing the Nantucket Islands Land Bank. This was a hearing that was left open for a notice of intent for 158 Orange Street, which was Mike Bachman's former residence, in which we are proposing to remove the existing structure from the property. That removal involved a temporary disturbance of the wetland that's at the eastern portion of the site along the driveway. And at the time, we had our DEP number, but DEP did have some questions with regard to the temporary disturbance, placement of plates, and so forth. That's all been resolved, so we're good with DEP. There is no national NHESP filing. And David Haynes subsequently did submit a revised report with regard to the invasive species removal component, which was involved in that front wetland area, which is involved in the temporary disturbance area and then also the Phragmite area along the front. So David did refine his invasive species removal, basically, protocol, and that has been submitted. We did ask for waivers for the project, and that has to do with essentially the disturbance of work within the 25 and 50, albeit it's a removal of a structure and then the regrading. So we did submit that under the premise there'll be a long-term net benefit to the work proposed. So I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have, but I think we have everything we need to close the public hearing.
Are there any questions from the commissioner or the public still on this project? Jeff, we have everything we need to close.
Yes, sir.
Well, if the commission's ready, do I have a motion to close?
Move close.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries unanimously. Thank you, Paul. The Lower Pocomo Nominee Trust at 88 Pocomo Road.
This is another one, Mr. Chairman, that was continued last time because the file number didn't come in until about 4:45. So we already continued it.
Correct. And that was the only reason for the continuance on this one. This was 88 Pocomo Road, which is down at the very end of Pocomo. It's a parcel of land adjacent to the Gamble residence at the very end, which is 90 Pocomo. This is 88 Pocomo. This application was notice of intent for work outside of the 25, small amount of clearing between the 50 and the 100 for the purposes of putting up a view stand, grading of a driveway, which would be in the site, majority of which is outside the 100-foot buffer zone. But then there was also a beach stair component to the application. Land, the regulated areas are coastal bank, beach, and land subject to coastal storm flowage. So the application before you did not require waivers for any of the particular work. So again, beach stairs and then a limited amount of clearing, basically a 30-foot radius or a 60-foot diameter area between the 25 and 100-foot buffer zone for the purposes of putting up a view stand on the property. Obviously, any work for a single-family home or any type of structures on the property would have to come back, I would believe, under a new notice as opposed to an amended order. That would come in under a new notice of intent. Yeah. And that is, this is a property also that we had we had put some sand drift fencing on under 2 applications that Mark Ritz had permitted for the Gamble residence and the front of this lot also about a year ago.
Any questions?
So that's just continuing from a prior, so this will now have 2 permits on it? It has 1 permit for the sand drift fencing?
Yeah, there's a permit for the sand drift fencing.
Yep.
And then this would be a separate notice of intent for the stairway. And then
A third one for the
there'd be
house?
a third one. And I know Mark is working on reports now for the yearly reports on the sand drift fencing and so forth, because we provided him some information on that recently with regard to cross-sections and sand loss and so forth.
Quick question. I listened to this last night. Is this a property that's owned, the owner's putting up the viewing stand and putting in the
Correct.
stairs? Okay. As
Yes.
opposed to along the
Yeah.
sale.
Yeah. Well, no, it is, yeah, the current owner of the property is putting up the stand, but
It's for the purpose of sale.
purpose of sale. So,
I'm just wondering about if the next owner really wants beach stairs, if it should be applied for, but I suppose the current owner has the right to. Okay.
yeah. Well, I mean, they don't necessarily have to build the beach stairs, it's just they've
So
got a
you're
3-year
saying-
permit.
Oh, I see what you're saying, it's the current.
Yeah, there's no intent to build
I
the
got it.
beach stairs
It's
at this
to raise
point.
the value of the lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just call the notice of intent.
Didn't pick up on that one. Okay.
They're noticing us of their intent
Of their intent
to
to
possibly
build-
build beach stairs.
Okay, I got it. I didn't pick up on that last night. Okay.
But I can see, I see your point.
Yeah,
It's not a notice of work.
that's cool.
Anything from the public? Okay, nothing else from the commission? And Jeff, do we have everything we need to close the hearing?
Yes, sir.
Move close.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries unanimously. Okay, Middle Valley LLC, 12 Middle Valley Road.
Just a reminder, this is another one that was held open last time for
Mark Ritz from Site Design, representing the applicants at 12 Middle Valley. As Jeff mentioned, this was held over for a file number. It's a request to construct a house, a pool, and a secondary outside of the 50-foot buffer to a BVW. It's also outside of the area which was agreed upon as part of a conservation restriction when this larger lot was subdivided. Basically, no work inside the 50 of any kind.
If you look close at the plan, we pointed it out last time, but it's easier. Really, the portions of the work that are in question are a very small corner of the three
house,
buildings.
the pool, and part of the
and then
pool
the-
house.
the front.
And then the garage up front.
But a majority of the work that's shown on the plan is all outside of our jurisdiction.
No waivers
Yes, sir.
required, complies with all of our standards.
In my opinion, yes.
Okay, any other questions from the public or commission? Okay, Jeff, do we have everything we need to close?
Yes, sir.
Do I have a motion to close the hearing?
Move to close?
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, gun. 357, 11, and 15 East Kristen Avenue.
Mr. Chairman, Arthur Gasparro for the applicant. I'd like to request a continuance on this matter. We were hoping to have a full board to start the application.
Fine with me.
So was I.
Continued until,
The next meeting, hopefully we'll have a full board.
okay, that would be the 6th.
Yes, sir.
Unless I hear an objection from the commission, we'll continue this till the 6th of August.
Sorry about that.
Need more time to read, I appreciate it. One.
Thanks, Art. Okay, so it's continued to the 6th. Cressman, 8 Walwinet Road.
For the applicant, Art Gasparro, Blackmore Associates. I'm before you tonight with a notice of intent application, along with Mr. Reed, for construction of a single-family dwelling and work within the buffer zone to bordering vegetated wetlands. Shown on the plan before you are the vegetated wetlands, which have been, the boundaries of which have been confirmed by a previous request for determination of applicability. Shown on the plan are the 25, 50, and 100-foot buffer zones. Almost the entire site is jurisdictional. There is a small area, or some area, which is outside of the 100-foot buffer zone, and that's where the proposed leach bed is sited. The proposed structure is located entirely outside of the 50-foot buffer zone, and the limit of work is maintained greater than the 25-foot no disturb zone. The only waiver that I've asked for is for potentially for a 2-foot separation distance to groundwater, and again, that's a bit of an assumption based on the seasonal high groundwater that was encountered for the septic system based on redox features and not necessarily observed water. And if dewatering was required, we do have area outside of the 100-foot buffer zone to do that. So with that, again, it's essentially a non-waiver project except for the possible need for temporary dewatering. The septic system is a conventional system, though it does incorporate a pump chamber so that we can elevate the leach bed, and the grading that you see associated here is with essentially elevating that system. And there's a proposed driveway and a proposed well also, again, all coming in outside of the 25-foot no disturb zone. And see, Jeff's just checking. I want to check it that I did request the waiver. Or did
You did.
Okay.
Yes.
And with that, I'd be happy to try to address any questions or concerns that you may have with the application.
Any questions from the commission?
This is essentially like a salt marsh area here, or what
No,
is the
oh, no,
resource?
no, no. It's bordering vegetated wetland.
Okay.
We're significantly inland. This is on the east side of Wawanit Road. I have a locust map if that would help you.
Oh, yeah, it might,
It's
yeah.
sort of the corner of Pulpus and Wawanit Road. In other words, if you were heading out Wawanit Road, this is on your right, not on the harbor side.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So Wawanit Road comes out here, and then this is Pulpus Road.
Okay.
And so we're in this area, and you can see there's just various, this entire area, as you know, I've been in front of you with other applications on the abutting property in the past, and there's sporadic wetlands throughout this area.
That helps.
That interior wetland there, just to make it a little bit more clear, is more of a rather large shrub swamp with a lot of large trees in portions of it.
Which is good. I'm hoping that there's plenty of vegetation to absorb any issues from the septic. That's why I was looking to see exactly.
Oh, it's heavily
Which is
vegetated
good.
area, incredibly so.
Having gone out there with the RDA, it's thick.
Well, that's good. I mean, that means it has the ability to, that makes me feel better.
We will need to request a continuance only for Natural Heritage's response for 30 days, but we're happy to hear any other questions or concerns that you may have or the public may have.
Anything else from the commission?
All that grading work, do you have plenty of soil, and so you'll have to bring in soil for the grading?
No, I'd say we would be bringing in some sandy fill.
I'm just trying to make sure you don't bring any problems as far as invasive plants or stuff
Do our
like that.
best. I
Yeah.
don't think they're going to want.
Anything from the public on Cressman on 8 Walnut Road? So any other questions for Art before we continue this? So you want to continue
To the 6th, please.
Unless I hear an objection, we'll continue this to the 6th.
While we're on this, would you like me to draft an order for this for next time?
Yeah, I think so. That would be good. Okay, thanks, Art. Okay. That takes us to, is this T-Act 3 or TAC 3?
I call it TAC 3.
Let's be a little careful on that. So TAC 3 LLC at 26 Washington Street.
For the applicant, Art Gasparo, Blackwell Associates, along with Arthur Reed. We're before you tonight with a notice of intent application for essentially a redevelopment project for this property, which is located in the downtown area of Nantucket. We are down near the intersection. Commercial Wharf Street is right here. We're one property removed. We have frontage on Nantucket Harbor. What I have before you is both an existing and proposed condition site plan. There's significant details that we thought it would be best to have both on the record for you. And on the proposed conditions plan, we've kept most of the existing conditions, but put them into a lighter grayscale in the background. First off, I'd like to go through the resource areas on the property, which essentially we have the harbor, and then we have a coastal dune, which boundary is right here. And then on the adjacent property, there's an isolated vegetated wetland. The entire property is also located within land subject to coastal storm flowage. This property has been impacted by the recent change in FEMA firm mapping, and so part of the proposal for this application involves the modification, renovation, and lifting of the existing structure. That's what's shown on the proposed conditions plan. In the dark line, there are significant changes that are proposed to the structure. It's proposed to come up approximately 3.5 feet from where it is now. That's necessary. We're coming up as little as we have to, but that's what we have to in order to meet the new flood elevation, which in this area in the 1934 half-tide level datum that we're working in is elevation 12.4. So that's what the first floor mechanicals need to come up to. We're proposing to install a new foundation to support the structure that will be in compliance with the flood zone criteria for the state building code. We believe that represents an overall benefit to then bring the site into compliance with flood zone construction. Also proposed in the westerly corner of the lot is a proposed garage studio structure. That structure is located outside of the 50-foot buffer zone to both the coastal dune and the isolated vegetated wetland, but again within the land subject to coastal storm flowage. The first floor of that structure is not proposed to have living space, so we don't have to elevate that in the same, though the mechanicals for that structure would need to be greater than the elevation 12.4. We would have some slight modification to the driveway entrance in order to accommodate where the new structure is going, and we have some additional steps that are then required. There is modifications to the structure that exist. We have an existing handicap ramp and deck and structure along this side of the structure. That all gets further away from the isolated vegetated wetland. There are waivers requested for the work. I'm sorry, perhaps
Do you
it would
have
be
another
proposed
conditions?
conditions.
Like
Yeah, put on the other side, sure.
Yeah, that's.
Sorry about that, Ben. Here we go. This is the. Sorry, this way.
We were there.
Yeah.
Can you see it again?
Right, okay. I didn't really look at that.
The modifications to the structure, we remove structure so that we are increasing the horizontal separation distance. As you can see, this is, this plan is at 10 scale. It's a very small lot. We're talking about an 8,000 square foot lot. Options are quite limited in terms of, you can see in terms of the property line to the opposite side, there's not a lot of room to move around here, but we have tried to improve the existing situation by eliminating some of the structure that is right along that property line closest to the isolated vegetated wetland. It's, for the most part, I would consider this an infill type of a project where we do have some additional structural areas around, and there's sort of a reconfiguration, if you will, of what is deck incorporating into new architectural features. We have included the architectural drawings in the application to give you a sense. The project is also pending before the HDC, so there may be some revisions as we run through, either from your process or their process, just so that you are aware of that. And the only other aspect of the project that really just that involves work into an area that's not currently disturbed is that we're proposing a new walking path to the beach, and no structural elements associated with that. Essentially just cut through the rugosa and make a walking path. You can see that the existing path on the opposite property line goes on to the adjacent property. And so we're proposing simply a new path on our own property and just to abandon the other path. And there may be some dewatering that would be required with the installation of this foundation, which we would seek permits from the DPW for temporary dewatering. There'd be no permanent dewatering systems, no basements or anything of that nature, again, being in the flood zone and flood compliant construction. I believe that summarizes the project, and we'd be happy to try to address questions or concerns that you may have.
Anything from the commission?
Silt fence, where, I mean, how are you gonna, it's such a tight lot, how are you gonna keep construction debris from here?
No, I'll add that to the plan. And so essentially, though, to answer the question, the only thing I could do would be to put the property lines, the silt fence would run right along each of the north and south property lines, and then I would also install it along, or propose it along the east side of the existing brick walkway. That's correct. No, we're not proposing disturbance into that area, but I'll establish a limit of work. That's correct.
Does that mean that's gonna be, I think, critical for the site?
Absolutely. Good. That's I should have shown that.
Well, you usually do. There's a lot on the drawing, so
A lot of lines.
just making sure I'm not missing it. Where are you going to store?
There'll be no, obviously the amount of, this is going to have to be a highly managed type of construction project. There is no room for on-site storage. It would essentially be load directly into a dump truck and haul material away, whatever material that you may have. I would anticipate a single roll-off dumpster on the site, but beyond, which would be out in, this is all brick in the along the road, and so I think that's the, again, the options for logistics on this project don't lend themselves really to any kind of on-site storage of materials.
And do you think the driveway is going to change?
The driveway is going to change at the entrance, and we can show that on the revised plan as well. That's a good point. I didn't show how the new entrance would be configured, but we can get you that information.
Art, it looked like there was a wetland just on the other side of Washington Street over here, and even though you're separated by a major road, there is a wetland on the other side of the street there.
We had David Haynes do this wetland and look at the area, but I'll ask him to revisit that.
Okay. And this is not important. I mean, maybe it could be if something ever comes up, but is this a maple tree here, or I thought that was a sycamore?
I'm not a tree expert, and my drafter labeled that, and that could have come from, let me look into that for you. I don't know the answer.
Okay.
But we did confirm, I believe, that it's not a town tree.
Is it?
You just see if it's
What
an
does that
invasive species.
It is sycamore is supposed to be, right? Not highway, but
Well, that maple that we have.
it's the Norway.
Yeah, it's probably or a sycamore maple. If it's
I can get you that answer very easily, and I'll include that with the supplemental filing, just so that you
Yeah,
know,
I mean,
and so that
it's
it's at
not
least
in the-
correctly
just
labeled
a-
on the plan.
If they ever wanted to take it out, there may be more hoopla if it's not a.
I'm interested, was the Rosa rugosa in the front was planted 20 years ago or something like that? There's that, I'm just wondering how it acts in a storm as a protection in that area.
Yeah.
Maybe that's not directly this, but I'm just interested.
Well, that's the one, with the path, they're taking away a little bit of their protection, in other words.
What, Sarah, what would you put if you were planting something like that, What
Well-
would work, is that the best working?
It probably,
thing?
I mean, it's considered invasive, but it is one of the best things to
Work-
plant.
Right,
Yeah.
because it is really heavy there.
Yeah, it's very heavy there.
Area of invasive, except it hasn't been voted invasive by the invasive plant board.
Right.
They've decided for political reasons or some other reasons.
It's on a.
Well,
it's
people
on the
love it, and they
potential
think that it's
invasive.
native.
Yeah.
A lot of people think that it's
Exactly.
native. It's connected to Nantucket.
So
yeah.
we just wander off the science a little bit on invasive.
It certainly deters activity.
Right.
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah.
right.
In those
Well, when you
areas.
look at that stuff right there, but there's a lot of fruit
Yeah.
on it, you know?
Right.
I want to make marmalade again, you know? I sneak down there at night, you know?
But again, we're just looking for just a walking path for,
Yeah,
for
right.
as a water-dependent use for access to the beach.
For your foundation, is it sonotubes or piers or?
That's still to be determined. The architectural team is working with a structural engineer, and they're looking at, that was a question that I had posed to them as well, and I didn't have a definitive answer
So
on
maybe
that.
breakaway
I don't-
panels or?
Yeah, right, exactly. What it will be, what I could tell you, is that it will be compliant with the most current state building code, but I don't believe they've determined exactly whether it would be, I wouldn't expect it to be piers. I believe it would be either a solid fill foundation or it would be the type that allow the floodwaters through. But we're investigating that at this time. And clearly, either way, regardless of the type, we'd be looking at being sure that it has footings below the frost line. And that's why we've mentioned the dewatering activities.
Did you do a breakdown of the, you said it's probably going to change because the HCC hasn't approved it. Did you do any breakdown of ground cover?
I did not. In terms of per zone,
Well, you've got
existing
little
proposed
bumps
type of a
taken
thing?
off. Yeah.
Okay.
You're so good at that.
Well, yeah, it helps us as far as. You're not, I mean, it's pretty much impermeable now, so it's not like it changes the stormwater.
It really doesn't. That's exactly right. Between the, that's as we sort of started off with the presentation, it really is a redevelopment of these areas. But we'll put together a table for you that shows existing and proposed within the 25 and 50-foot buffer zones to both the coastal dune and the isolated vegetated wetland, and add that to the plan.
My only concern with the path, besides maybe reducing a little bit of your protection from storm waves, is that you might have a channelization effect with so much impermeable surface where rainwater can sit in a big rainstorm. You might get a lot of water flowing that way that's channelized by.
Well, I think I could address that by showing the topography.
Oh, good,
Because in
okay.
my mind, having been there, but I don't have that, is that you have a rise and a fall.
Okay, that's great. That would be, this is.
Forecasts tend to reduce that, so.
Yeah, I just didn't get a chance to visit the site, and that's one thing you want to look out for, is not
Right.
to.
For example, it is somewhat shown here. I have these two spot elevations. It's not exactly on the path, but you have 4.9 here and 5.6 there, and then 3.9 down to there. So I believe that would alleviate that concern, but certainly I can take a row of shots, topography
Well, just
shots,
make sure you
and
don't-
add them to the plan.
You don't add a little channel for rainwater to go into the harbor. Whatever's on that pavement.
Anything from the public? If there's nothing else from the commission, Art, do you want to continue this?
Yes, if we could continue until the 6th, we will get you revised plans and the requested information.
Okay, unless you hear an objection, we'll continue to the 6th. Okay, thanks, Art.
Thank you.
Okay, Cianava at Sheep Pond Road. No number.
No, we do have, you should.
I mean, no street numbers.
No.
We have a presenter on this?
Yes.
Thank you. For the applicant, Paul Santos with Nantucket Surveyors.
That's for that sign.
This is a notice of intent
for construction of a single-family home and associated utility infrastructure, guest house, parking, and so forth at the end of Head of Plains Road. This is part of what was the remnants of Ted Cross's estate. Ted had a fair amount of holdings down in this area, most of which he gave to the Conservation Foundation. He did retain 2 lots at the end of Head of Plains Road and 1 at the beginning at 4 Head of Plains Road. This one here has recently been developed and was the subject of a notice of intent about a year and a half ago. So the property itself is actually, when you come down the end of Sheep Pond Road now and take that left to go up to the last set of houses that are right on the water side over here, essentially this piece is that parcel right here. It's at the end of Sheep Pond Road, and then the side of the property over here is actually, it abuts Long Pond, the north side of the property. So the work involved is all buffer zone work, no waivers are required, and we do have a small section of the property that is land subject to coastal storm flowage. The wetland line was established by a determination of applicability that received a positive 2A confirmation, so the wetland line had been previously established and is still a valid line. The site itself is the subject of an NHESP permit, which was obtained at the time when we permitted an access road into the property in this way. This is the subject property, the Ryland property, which has now been developed, and then we're now looking at this piece here. So this entire area here does have an NHESP permit and 2 or 3 amendments there too. The notice of intent has been submitted to NHESP with regard to comments with regard to the Wetland Protection Act. So I do not have that information yet, so the hearing today will have to be left open with regard to an NHESP letter with regard to the act. The proposal itself, and that was essentially a no-take with conditions, if you will, for this entire property, and it involved an access road and the development of three lots. Rather than segmented, it was all done as one large project. So the proposal before you is a single-family home, pool, guest house, associated parking, a septic system outside of the 100-foot buffer zone to the pond itself. The orange line here is the 100-foot buffer zone. The yellow line is the 50-foot no-build, and the other line is the 25-foot no-disturb. The 25-foot no-disturb was established as part of our NHESP approved limit of clearing also, and that has a symbolic fencing that will all be staked as part of the NHESP permit. And essentially, access will be off of the driveway here, off of the end of Head of Plains Road. There'll be no access for this section off of Sheep Pond, but there will be a drive up in this area here off of Sheep Pond Road. The shoreline is along this side of the property. There are no buffer zones associated with the shoreline that affect the development. It's all work associated with the BVW, associated with Long Pond, which is obviously in this area, this right here. And that is the application. As I said, no waivers are required, and we do still awaiting NHESP comments with regard to the Wetland Protection Act.
Okay, any questions?
Is it a retaining wall?
Yes, it is. That's a low, less than 4-foot high retaining wall on the backside of the property. Yes.
This is a new grading proposed right there then?
Yes. Actually, the line here, the line with the squares, is actually the approved limit of clearing from NHESP. So that's the approved limit of clearing. All work would be inside of that.
And it's simple enough to stay within that, you think?
Oh, definitely. Yeah. And similar to what we did on the Ryland property, that has to be staked, fencing put up, and then a certification provided by a surveyor, in this case us, to NHESP that symbolic fencing has been installed and is in place. Similar to what we did on the abutting parcel.
seem like a fair number of restrictions on the, are you expecting an issue with Mass Natural Heritage as far as?
With regard to the act?
Restrictions, yeah.
I don't think so. There was no comment with regard to the act on this parcel here, so I don't expect any. What we did have, like I said, the only conditions that we had was the symbolic fencing, the certification, the staking, and that was really it with regard to what their conditions were on the original approval.
And they've looked for rare species down here, no records down there?
Yeah, that's correct, yeah.
Even though they expect to find them, there's not an actual, in this one letter, it looked like they had a lot of concerns about that. That's
I
why
would
it's-
think there'd be some kind there.
Yeah.
A lot of stuff you would have expected to find has been
Mhm.
recently delisted those, so.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, there was a fair number of Jeep, and you can see from the aerial photos here, there was Jeep trails for a number of years all over the property. In fact, there were easements that were retained at one point for access off of Red Barn down here. There was old Jeep trail easements that actually ran down to the water that have since been extinguished. A lot of those trails still do exist, but have been allowed now to just revegetate. But we're close to the 30 days. I would expect to see something fairly soon with regard to their decision with regard to the act.
Anything from the public on the Sheep Pond Realty Trust? Okay, well, since we can't close it, Paul, do you want to continue to the 6th?
Yes, please.
Unless I hear an objection, we'll continue this to August 6th. Okay, thank you. What time did So, Dionis Realty Trust at 73 Hill Point Road.
For the applicant, Leo Azagorian with Blackman Associates and Attorney Arthur Reed. You have an application in front of you to move an existing structure back from an actively eroding coastal bank. The position of the house was determined by the project architects along with the owner. We've since gone out there and done soil tests to see if we obviously could get a septic system in. The tests were witnessed by the Board of Health. We're fine with installing a septic system. Everything will be moved back outside jurisdiction of the commission. The area where the house is right now, the septic system will be taken out. The house obviously will be backfilled. The notice of intent required the site to be regraded 6 inches along, seeded and peg netted to ensure that there was no active erosion. We also have 300 plus feet of construction fencing placed around the site only because of the close proximity of the house to the bank right now. It drops off quite a bit. Other than that, it's pretty straightforward. We're just trying to get the house moved and get it in position and get it back from that bank. Right now, that bank is coming back just a little over 5 feet a year. So it's pretty active.
Well, it is pretty active for down
And we estimated 30, 32 years or so before it's going to have to be moved again, or obviously it might have to be downsized, obviously, because of the lack of lot area and the square footage of the house. And if there's any questions, we'd certainly like to answer them right now if we could.
What is the time period for that 5 feet a year? How far back does that go in the records?
It varies, obviously, based on the storms, but the last couple of years, we've looked at about a 5 foot.
Right, but that might just be a couple of years. I mean, a lot of the North Shore has years of being stable.
Yeah, the last couple of years have been tough, the toughest.
Right.
Before that, we did analyses back in 2011, and it was just a little over 2 feet a year.
Right.
So,
Yeah,
yeah. The last 2 years, though, have been really active out there.
Not for the Long Island.
Yeah.
So you're just picking it up, jacking it up and moving, or knock down or rebuild?
It's going to be moved back. The existing house is going to be moved back, and there was actually an addition. This dark area is an addition, and then they're going to do some addition to the deck. this face right in here is the existing face of the house. They'll remove, obviously, that deck and redo the deck, and they've got an addition going on. The architectural plans were submitted with the notice of intent for your inspection as well.
So the closest distance on the front of this, like at this point here, to the current top of coastal length, how far?
About 184 feet.
Okay. Any other questions? Anything from the public on Ionis? Okay, well, Jeff didn't say he had any issues, so you ready to close?
Do you have to wait? They've got a number, there's not,
We
they're
have a
not
file
waiting
number.
for, okay. I'm just checking.
Looks like everything's good.
Move to close?
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries unanimously.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay,
We need to vote to take, accept this withdrawal.
oh yeah, we do have a withdrawal. Kaplan at 37 Holbert Ave. We're just choosing to withdraw this, I'm assuming without prejudice. Is anybody here to represent this?
Yeah, no, Paul Santos from Nantucket Surveyors, we did submit a written request for withdrawal today to Jeff.
Okay.
And that was for, it was 37 Howard Ave, it was an amended order for the construction of a shed and raising of some exterior utilities. So we are
Okay.
withdrawing.
Okay.
Okay, do I have a motion?
Yeah, move to accept the withdrawal.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries unanimously.
Are you jumping in for Jeff? Wow. I have a big job too. Anything I can help me on, you'd be awesome.
Okay, we go to the public meeting, minor mods, 17 Mass Ave, nominee trust at 17 Massachusetts Avenue.
Paul, do you want this back?
No.
So we do have, this is LEC. Someone from LEC here? No.
No, I saw him leave actually.
Hmm?
Oh, Stan? Stan what?
Yeah, I thought Stan was here.
No, he left, I saw him at the door.
I actually should explain this, but I'll pass it down. Have you guys look? It looks like there's a change to the stairs.
Yeah, there you go.
What are we on?
The first
Minor
minor mod.
Mass Ave.
Minor mods.
Looks like they're, yeah, they're removing some steps and things and sort of sliding them around. Where are the buffers here?
There's stairs in the front.
This is within the 0 to 25.
Yeah, it is in the 25, so it's pretty close to the wetland.
Yeah.
And they previously
There's the
approved,
wetland and then
There's a
here's-
small piece that's approved and then edge of vegetation.
so it sticks out the
So
side.
the house was just barely out, just barely sitting on the 25 before.
It's
No
very
lot.
complication. So basically, it just has to take the stairs and instead of coming out the front, and just go down the side.
And it's a coastal dune, it's
Yeah.
a long ways from the harbor.
I don't think it's a big change
You have
in.
to change it all.
No, it doesn't
really.
seem like a very, like there's some give and take.
Vegetation.
Okay, anything from the public on this? Anything else from the commission?
That's those stairs.
Okay.
Sure Bam and Mike can see it. It seems minor, it seems appropriate for a minor mod.
Yeah, perfect.
Everyone's looked at it and it's fine, then I'll make that motion.
So that's a motion to approve as a minor mod.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries unanimously. Okay, Desert Island LLC, 13 Delaney Road, lot number 7.
Just a second.
Okay, thanks.
This one. This is ours?
Yeah.
Sorry about that. That's all right. The second minor mod, Desert Island LLC.
Mike Gasparo for the applicant for you tonight to request a minor modification. There's been, do we have the plans, or, I have them right here.
We do need
We've
Jeff,
got
don't we?
32 Deep Woods.
Not that
64
there's ever any
Cliff.
doubt.
Well, for the certificates of compliance, we might really need them because he's usually the one that goes and verifies.
Apologize, that's one file I didn't grab, so I have this, and if this is something that is insufficient, we can certainly, or you have it in your packet
Yeah, in
as
the
well.
packet,
But if you need more, I'd be happy to continue it as well after I present it, if the commission feels they need the full-size plan to view. What's shown on the plan that you can see on your, that is here, and that you can see in your electronically, the dashed line represents what was approved, and the solid lines represent what's proposed. And it's basically, I don't have the, that's a different one. Yeah, thanks. Don't worry about it, Guy. Thank you, though. And what we've done, what the applicant has done is to, since the approval, work on the final design of the structure, and he's proposed a rotation to align the structure with Delaney Road instead of being sort of askew. And what that's done is the structure itself doesn't move any closer to the wetland resource area, but the proposed pool does. And the driveway also shifts closer to the resource area here. We have proposed 15, this all is within the limit, though, of what is an existing paved driveway that comes in. So we didn't go, he didn't bring this any further than what's currently been disturbed in the paved road going in, but it does shift the driveway that was approved about 8 feet or so closer to the wetland resource area. Everything else is very much the same in terms of features, and I don't believe that the application changes the scope of the project. It's essentially a twist and shifting, if you will, on the property within previously disturbed areas.
Okay, any questions?
How close does the, how close does the pool get now to the?
It's at about 28 feet away from the resource area. So it was approved within the 50-foot buffer zone, though now it is shifting. At its closest point, it's shifting approximately 3 feet closer, but there's more of it that's closer. So just to be clear.
Is there any vegetation between the old asphalt driveway and now the new proposed, I'm assuming, stone driveway and the wetland?
That silt fence would be maintained, and it's vegetated right now, and that would remain as the limit of work.
Has the shape of the house changed?
Slightly.
Yeah.
It's gotten smaller. It went from 3467 to 3170, so we dropped 300 square feet, all within the 100-foot buffer zone. Or there's a slight bit within the, no, that's all, that structure remains, the house itself remains outside of the 50-foot buffer zone, and it has been reduced. And again, this was all approved with gutters, downspouts, subsurface infiltration facilities.
Any other questions? Okay, well, do I have a motion to approve this as a minor mod? Well,
guess I'll
This is a tricky lot.
request,
Yeah.
I could request a continuance if the bigger plan or some, if there was feedback that some changes may be more amenable to the commission, I could certainly convey that to the applicant. If there's specific aspects of the modification that are of concern, if you could let me know, then I'd be happy to continue the matter and then discuss it with the applicant. I take it it's the pool.
We were reluctant
Yeah.
about the pool in the
Yeah,
beginning.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's,
And now
Well,
it's getting even closer.
Well, and it's hard to kind of tell as far as the amount of change in impervious spacing in the 25 to 50 and in the 0 to 25. I kind of can tell what's happening, but,
Okay.
I mean, I guess a better plan would help a little bit. I'm a little cautious on this one. I'm not
Yeah.
jumping for joy.
Why don't, if I could, Mr. Chairman, I'd ask that this be held over, and I will discuss it with the applicant, see what we can come back with.
That'd be good.
unless
Just
I
getting
have
out,
an objection, we'll hold this over to the 6th.
once again, like the calculations of the reduction in size and then the change in impervious and impervious, it's just hard for me to read on here.
Very good.
'Cause you're-
I'll bring in a plan with a little more information.
Yeah.
And possibly some revisions. Thank you.
If we want, we can go back to 17 Mass Ave. I've got it here, too.
We already did it. We're way done. Yep. We are, we did
We're down
vote.
to certs now.
We voted that was a minor mod that we were happy with. So that passed. And we had some juggling, some interesting juggling of the plans, but we got it done. She did a
And
good
we
job.
approved the withdrawal on 37 Holbert Ave.
Yeah, but he is coming back on, so we're right at certificates of compliance on AC Easy LLC.
All right, Akizi LLC, this is one of them that was for, if you remember in the storm from a year ago, this was for the damage that was done to the bulkhead. Yeah, it was just for the reconstruction of the out here 84 linear feet of wooden bulkhead destroyed during the winter storm. It's been reconstructed in the same location that it was priorly approved, and I would recommend the issuing of the certificate of compliance. And this is the one. I just have the one catch on this one. That with the ongoing condition 22, that's any treatment of the wooden bulkhead is to be limited to once a year. Other than that, I would recommend the issuance of the certificate of compliance.
I have that motion.
So moved.
Second?
Did you have a motion and seconded to issue the certificate of compliance with ongoing condition number 22? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries unanimously. Okay. Del Balzo at 6 and 8 Grove Lane.
Sure, Del Balzo, 6 and 8 Grove Lane. This was for the construction of a secondary dwelling and some other associated site work. You have the as-built plan with this one, I'll have them to take it out. But again, this was built in compliance and built in the location that we permitted, and this doesn't have any ongoing conditions. I would recommend the approval of this certificate of compliance.
Move to issue the certificate of compliance.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries unanimously. Okay, Abrams Point Realty Trust at 30 Rabbit Run Road.
All right, and the continuing theme of tonight, this was again for an additional bulkhead repair replacement for that dwelling that's on the kind of the end of Abrams Point. Again, this was built in compliance with what was permitted. And I would recommend this one to get issued as well.
Got a motion to issue the certificate of compliance.
So moved.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries unanimously. Westmore Club LLC and
Yes.
Duchester LLC at 105 and 109 West Chester Street.
I'm going to turn this one over to Paul because this is a little more involved. So,
Thank you. For the record, Paul Santos with Nantucket Surveyors on behalf of Westmore LLC. So we're talking about two certificate of compliances, actually number 4, I think number 4 and 5 on your list. There are two separate certificates here. One was closing out the permit down in the Field of Dreams section, if you will, where the baseball field used to be, was construction of a tennis court and a putting green. The putting green was never actually constructed. The tennis courts, there's a clay tennis court and a grass tennis court, all constructed outside of the 50. So that's one of the certificate of compliances was for this area right here. The other was for the construction of the roadway out onto Westchester Street, and that work was within the buffer zone to the vernal pool and vegetated wetland that was across the street that came into play when Westchester Street was relocated and repaved. So that was a buffer zone filing, and that's this access drive right in here. So that closes out two notices for the Westmore Club itself. There will still be one more notice left, and that was for the construction of the tennis courts up in the Dukester lot parcel of the club. That is still open through the Permit Extension Act, and that doesn't expire until December of this year. I probably will be coming back to ask for an additional 1-year extension of that permit, but that won't be done till the end of this year. So that will leave just the one permit open right now for the entire club, and that's it. So there's actually two. I don't know if you take them one by one, but there was two separate requests for certificate of compliance.
Okay, the first one is Westmore Club SC 48 2644.
Move to issue. And there's also an SE 48 2131. 2131.
Oh, I'm sorry, I was on the wrong. Yep, 2131. I'm sorry.
That's all right.
Better have that motion again then.
No, I'm happy to make that motion again.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries unanimously.
Issues.
Okay, and then SC 48 1679.
Move to issue.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries unanimously. Okay, and then Howland, 90 Washington Street.
all right. Sticking with the theme yet again. This is the next door neighbor to 92. This was also for the bulkhead repair and replacement. This one also had a little bit of refilling behind the bulkhead as well. But again, it's pretty much in-kind replacement, so I would recommend that we could issue this certificate of compliance as well.
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That carries unanimously. Okay, takes us to the orders of conditions. First one on the list is the town of Nantucket at 188 Nantucket Road.
All right, I just said, from our discussion tonight, I was just going to add in, Mr. Chairman, in the permit overview. I actually have permits the removal of multiple invasive species, so
So you're fine.
we're still covered. And in this one, last discussion we had limited to the glyphosate. Sometimes we also permit the use of triclopyr. I don't know what's off the top of my head. I don't remember which
I'm not
one's
sure
better
if you should on this
on
one.
loose strife, but
I've never heard of people using it on loose stripe.
neither have I.
And
So
it's a little
All right.
tricky this close to the.
yeah, so just our normal stuff on there. Besides that,
Okay, that looks like a pretty much standard
Reporting and,
species permit, yep.
yes.
Sounds good to me.
Yeah, do I have a motion to issue the order of conditions for the town on 188 Nantucket Road?
Sure.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Come on in, don't be shy.
That motion carries unanimously.
Ben will be happy to know I got your name back on the form this week.
Oh, yippee.
I got it correct. I remember. So,
Okay, the land bank at 158 Orange Street.
all right, this is the one that's for the removal of invasive species, then also the removal of the two homes, primarily the one in the back. It's moving off. It's primarily our invasive protocols. I couldn't really think of too many conditions for the house leaving, and then them essentially putting it back as public use lawn area. So,
And this has a pretty good silt fence installed. I mean, do we have any concerns as far as sedimentation?
no, they have a pretty solid limit of work established for their
Yep.
project on the points.
Includes no storage of material within 50 feet.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's move to issue as drafted.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries unanimously. Okay, the Lower Pocomo nominee trusted, 88 Pocomo Road.
Sure. So this is the one that was for the construction of the beach stairs, that kind of circular clearing, and then the construction of the driveway. I included our normal no construction materials outside of 50 feet for a project like this. Other than that, I was kind of, it's brush cutting in compliance and a driveway in compliance. I'm not really proposing lawn or, cutting a big circle.
Okay. If there's no concerns, I'd say move to issue as drafted.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That carries unanimously. Okay, Middle Valley LLC at 12 Middle Valley Road.
Sure. So this is just that the site development project that was just inside the 100 for kind of the three structures in the pool. Just included kind of all materials outside of 50 feet, and then our typical no pool discharge into an area of our jurisdiction. Other than that, I'm kind of no waivers or anything fancy. So.
Okay, that is everything, so. I have a motion to issue as drafted.
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That carries unanimously.
I love how when we issue these, we just slowly lose like people all the time here.
Say something exciting later. They don't know.
Okay,
And that's the last one I was.
Cianaba
Nope.
at, oh,
Did you guys end it? We
We didn't close that.
didn't
Oh,
close
we
that
didn't
one.
close it.
Yeah.
Sorry. We had that natural heritage issue. And then I was just going to ask, did we close Diana's Realty Trust, or is that continued as well? Sorry, that's the one I missed.
Closed. That's the one moving back. Yes, we closed that. Yeah. The house moving
Okay,
back
well,
away.
I didn't draft one for that, so.
Yeah. We didn't seem to have very many issues.
So,
Yep, it's a good plan to me.
well, we didn't get to close much tonight, did we?
We closed that. We closed the town of Nantucket, number 3.
yeah, fair enough. So just real quickly,
8.
for the stuff that you guys asked me to draft, did anyone have anything specific with the Craftsman application, the house on Mowinnet and Chase Lane? It seemed pretty straightforward. Yeah, it's a kind of development project. We've forgotten. That's the one that was Mowinnet and Chase Lane. It's got the big shrub swamp next to it. Septic system's outside of 100. The whole lot's kind of jurisdictional.
Yeah.
I couldn't think of too much. And then it sounds like the other two that we were talking about drafting were the Sheep Pond Road project. That one seemed pretty straightforward for C and Nova.
Yeah,
And then the Dynamis one, not that I listened to the hearing, but I'll rewatch it, but from the sound of it, it sounds like it was pretty
that was
straightforward as well.
good, I think,
All right. Not a problem. All right.
yeah. Okay.
Good stuff.
Okay, other business. Approval of minutes.
We don't have any this time. Sorry, I've been a little behind.
Okay, reports. Don't have a CPC rep right now. NP and EDC? Nothing. Mosquito control?
We haven't had a meeting. We're working on some educational efforts, and I can talk to Emily Hibbard, who works in my lab. If you guys want her to come in and talk about what they're doing, she'd be happy to. She's working hard. We haven't had a meeting.
Okay, anything else? I just noticed that brochure for fertilizers for homeowners, which seems pretty nice. That little.
The one that came in your tax bill?
Can you send-
Or a different one?
Can you send me a copy? I didn't get it.
Sure. I actually have a bunch in my office, one that the Shellfish Association put together that went in everyone's personal property tax.
Yeah, if I get a digital version, I get a lot of civic meetings, and people ask for those things, and I don't have any copy.
Sure, I can get you those. I can get you the other little brochure, too. I have a few of those
Yeah,
left.
just shoot me, if you would, that would be fantastic. I spoke at 3, as you know, Jeff and I spoke together at a couple of meetings last week. Our Dog and Pony Show, which we so affectionately called. Which we have down to smooth.
We complete each other's sentences.
Yes, it's adorable.
Okay, commissioners' comments. Jeff, I don't know if this person ever called you, but somebody called me and said they had witnessed a shark attack on a seal down at Cisco Beach. Did you hear that from your lifeguards or anything? Or has she seen things?
Nothing that's really been overly substantiated at this point. We do get a few of those every summer. People call in and seals were attacked, or sometimes it's a lot of calls we get, maybe like mola or just dolphin or something that's out in
Yeah,
the water.
we didn't have anything from the stranded.
We do
too.
follow up, but we haven't really had anything
Okay.
that's really been clearly documented at this point. We've had a few dead seals on the beach, and there have been a few that washed up that definitely show a little wear and tear of it. It's hard to really determine. Sometimes when they come up as goo, what's been chewing on them, it can be a lot of stuff.
Do we have any concern? I felt bad for E equals MC squared, the boat that burned on its mooring in the harbor. Do we have any environmental concerns as far as melted fiberglass floating around the harbor?
They did a pretty good job keeping it contained. That stuff's always so difficult to deal with just because it's hard to tell what gets loose very quickly. So we've kind of been out and around, have checked, and they got most of it pretty well taken care of, but we are definitely looking to deal with it. That's right.
If you need me to send samples to the state, just let me know.
Yeah, definitely.
I can.
With a name like that, it sounds like it should have a reactor on board.
Yeah, it should. Well, I wish that it wouldn't. It was pretty bad. I mean, obviously a bad fire, and that could put a lot of material into the harbor, which is not great.
Yeah. So I know that DEP was notified of what was going on.
Did they take samples, do you know?
I'm not sure. I haven't really followed up with.
If I do end up doing that in Sunny State, I'll make sure you get that data.
Absolutely, that'd be great.
Present it.
That'd be great to know.
Yeah.
Oh, all right, okay.
All right, whenever it's my turn.
Okay, Jeff?
I get a few things.
To you.
Well, that's getting passed around. We do need to pick a new CPC representative. I would really love if we did, because that way I could get Neville Richmond to stop calling me 3 times a day. It's something we have to do. So, and I cannot do it before anyone asks. I'm not eligible. So amongst yourselves, if someone wants to volunteer, if it doesn't work out and it looks like your time is not being well spent or you're not enjoying it, worst comes to worst, you can always step off and we can try to find someone else to volunteer. But someone has to. And I don't want to be mean and say we're not leaving until someone does. So
Let's see, who at the table has done their time on the CPC?
Look at this.
It's on the table, has been on more boards in the last 3 years than everyone combined.
Does everyone know what the CPC is, first of all? Yeah.
Community preservation. The only reason I didn't want to be on is I might put in an application, but I've been sitting there for 6 years.
Yeah.
How often do they meet?
Michael?
It's not that
Do
often.
you know, how often did you guys meet when you were on CPC? I know they have kind of a busy season, and then it's pretty slow, but
Yes, and so when the applications come in, there's a fair amount of, it isn't so much how often, I don't recall, but it was the duration of the meetings, and it was, they tended to stack up on Concom weeks. So you'd have Monday field hearings, Tuesday all day with CPC, Wednesday listen to protracted Concom hearings. Could make you grumpy.
we're trying to encourage people to do it, Michael. Trying to encourage people.
Is it daytime on Tuesdays that the CPC meetings are? Does anyone?
I don't remember. It
Sounds like you're
Okay.
interested, man. It would be
No,
great.
no, I'm trying to fulfill some kind of duty.
It's a good one. You don't say no. But
Yeah, I mean, it is. It's a worthwhile endeavor.
No, I
I mean, it's
understand
important.
that.
Well,
Or we might consider sponsoring an article to abolish it.
Well, the choice has been, if you're interested and want to give it a try, if it doesn't look like it's working, we can always.
So move.
I'm gonna look it up. I was starting to look it, but I'll check into it. Like, I don't even know
Sounds
who's
like
on
you
it.
are in. I don't know.
Can we put you down
do
tentatively?
another
We could do a rotation too. That's one.
All right.
We could
All right,
rotate.
Pam is in.
All right.
Different person.
Okay.
I don't know anything.
Good for you.
You're a good man, Pam. Good man.
Yep, I'll remember
Come
that.
back and talk to us, and if you want to rotate out, we can rotate around.
Well, I'll go to the next meeting or something. I'll contact Erica. Who do I talk to?
I'll let you need to contact Neville Richin. He's their administrator.
Oh, he's okay. Oh, no kidding. Right. Okay.
Yep.
I will.
And then I'll let him know too that you're gonna get a hold of him, and then we'll.
Okay. Now that I said that, can I say something as a commissioner's comment?
Yes.
I'm hoping we hear from our seventh member. There was somebody that came in today that said they wanted the full board, and until we have
I'm hoping
Dave show up, we don't have a full board.
Yeah.
We haven't had that in about 8 years where we've got an issue where new members. But, it's been two
Well,
meetings.
I'm sorry. I know Dave, and I'm not going to call him up and tell him he ought to come, but I hope he comes.
Well, I'm gonna stick JC on him, so we'll get him in,
That's
Yeah.
scary.
Yeah.
whether he wants to or not. All right. So the other thing I handed out really quickly. This is kind of an enforcement issue, but I thought we'd take it up now. The Hummock Pond Road bike path, and I apologize for this not getting to you sooner, but Mr. Madden wanted to make some revisions to it and made some changes to it today and sent us this in. It's his report from his delineation that's there. I wanted to talk about it a little bit, and I know this is kind of unfair to me because I'm the only one in here that's really had a chance to read it. But I think he did a pretty thorough job looking at that wetland. The one thing that's kind of come up, and it's no fault of Brian's or even to no fault of the town or the construction, is there's an area that's there that is kind of right when you go down. If you go down there now, it's a pretty thick stand of sawbrush that's there. That really had a pretty light level of disturbance during construction that came out as being wet, and it's a little bit higher topographically. That we kind of believe that the delineation originally for that area may not have been as correct as it should have been for a number of reasons. For invasive species, the hydrology in that area can be kind of interesting how when you delineate it and those things. But I think it'll be important for us going forward when we do it that obviously we can't rewind the clock and go back and redelineate it and do those things. That it's probably important for us to take note that that area may not have been perfect right on the bat. Now, to fix the disturbance that was done to it and take care of that issue when we get there is still an important part of the process, but I think it's also good to acknowledge that that area may not have been perfect where we started from, because it was delineated
Is
by
it
VH.
higher now, or
It's
have
actually,
you changed the?
it's probably a little bit lower than its original surface area. They probably mowed it and then took off a little section of topsoil from it. But when you read Brian's report, it's pretty close. It probably would have been a pretty easy mistake to make by anyone, but it probably happened. So
Do we have a
Is that
remediation
sort of on the right
plan?
side if you're facing it from the path there?
if you're facing from the path, it's kind of, well, it'll be almost, it's to the
Kind
right
of
of
in
the
the front.
culvert. Yeah, it's
Oh,
right
to
in the
the right
front.
of the culvert,
Yeah.
okay.
That being said, we still have to deal with it as far as remediation and getting it back into shape, and whether or not it was done right originally without having the original conditions, it's hard to say. So when we certainly kind of summarize this in the enforcement and put the conditions and kind of close out the enforcement, I think it'll be important for us to note that that area may be a little more interesting than some of the rest. Other than that, the plan is coming as the surveyors were a little bogged down and had to make some corrections, but when we have the plan that shows the flag numbers, I think Brian did a pretty good job of detailing each section that he was in, and I thought his recommendations that he has at the end are pretty good. That being said, I have a couple other suggestions, what we look at, and then obviously our last letter to the town, kind of memorialized today, is the day to get this report in and kind of get the delineation put to rest and those things to kind of move forward. That I think it's important for us today to kind of outline some next steps too. And I know as long as she's still behind me, Kara is still here to kind of talk about it too. Sylvia was kind of running the project. Then I know we've also spoke with Cormac and Emily from the Land Council, who's the conservation restriction holder today. We're kind of in the like mind to keep making some incremental progress as we approach kind of the fall planting season, to kind of be the end of this cycle that's there. There's still some site work that can be done prior to then, but it looks like right now we're probably pretty safe to start doing some of the interior wattle and silt fence removal that's not really being used or utilized or not really important in maintaining the proper silt fence. I know there's been some thought about doing some work right at the end of the culvert as far as probably installing some sort of riprap or something to help with the sedimentation that's going on there, because there's a lot of sand that's come in and it's really kind of exacerbating a problem. And I want you guys to get a good chance to read through this too.
Should we schedule another
see.
walkthrough too, and with the report in hand? Because I mean, I haven't. Sites drive by.
I think if we put it on the field viewing schedule for the next meeting,
Yeah.
but I think prior to then, I think we need to outline some steps and some goals to make.
Yep.
Obviously, for us to have that site walk, I know administratively, I would like to get out there with both the
Land
town
council.
and the CR holder, and possibly the landowner too, just to kind of keep them involved in the process. But I think also giving some guidance to the town as far as instructions to say silt fence needs to be reinstalled. The old silt fence that's in, or that stuff, or the wattles that are there, can be removed or cut open, whatever's the correct method to deal with for some of those things, and to start preparing the site for planting in the fall. Feel free, if anyone has any thoughts or suggestions, jump in, or if you want to hop in.
I know that you just received this and have not had time to take a look at it, but the only thing that I wanted to ask the commission is, one, in his very last paragraph of his report section, he says the existing silt fencing should be removed. Right now it's impeding growth of the existing planting. And what I'd like to ask is if the commission feels so inclined to let us go in and remove that, and then as part for your next meeting, the surveyors were out there today, so we should have a plan very shortly that shows the wetlands line. What Brian has said, and what I'm hoping is that it will show that the replicated area is sufficient in size. And then what we'll do is come in with a planting plan. As he mentioned, the planting time really doesn't start until the fall. But I'd like to give the plants that are there the best opportunity to grow into the denuded area as possible. So if the commission is okay with it, what we'd like to do is take down the silt fencing that's there and then reinstall fencing as required for the season.
Is that something we should ask the CR holder? Are they all right with that?
We certainly can. I guess
I'm fine with
when
that.
we get there, I think my recommendation would also include a component that would certainly say to deal with the silt fence, the removal of the old, to deal with the new, and then I would also probably request that with the plan that comes in, and for our next meeting after we do our field viewing and all those silt fences are repaired, to also have not only idea what we're doing planting, but an idea for what we want to do as far as the sedimentation from that culvert, and to have that, because we can include
That's a
that
big
in the
concern.
enforcement to deal with that too. Because that's work that can obviously take place, if that decision's made on August the 6th for what we want to do, that work can take place prior to even when we're really looking to do any
That's actually
planting.
the optimum time of year to be doing it because the water flow is at its lowest.
Right.
Is that culvert getting sand from the road coming into that grate there?
It probably gets a little bit that comes in there. I mean, I think a lot of the sand that comes through there is probably across the street
Oh, coming
from
down.
that puddle.
So there's nothing that the current silt fence is doing to prevent that? It's only hurting vegetation from growing. It's not helping reduce the sedimentation issue.
Yeah, it's all kind of.
Yeah. It's a
messed
mess.
up, yeah.
They've never had silt fence directly in front of the culvert, so obviously during times of heavy flow, the silt fence would withstand it. So it's an issue that really is kind of a blight on an already tough area. That it is something. There's corrective action that can be pretty readily taken to deal with it. So
Get it out of there.
well, the culvert can't obviously leave, but it can get cleaned out and installed correctly with proper material at the end instead of just having, loose dirt or something that's there and just exacerbating the problem. So, do you have anything, Emily, you want to add?
Yeah, sure. I haven't actually been able to read through this all the way yet either. I think it will mean a lot more when a survey plan is actually done to accompany it, because then you can actually see where these different areas of the wetland are that he's describing. And also, as Kara suggested, that should give a better picture of the existing conditions now, how they compare with what was proposed in terms of square footage of the wetland replication area and the area of wetland that had been disturbed. So I think that that's sort of a key piece of information that you'll have to wait until the survey plan is completed to see that. I would definitely recommend going out to take a look at the site again since it's been so long, and especially now at this point if you're about to embark on sort of finishing the final revegetation. It looks very different, I'm sure, than the last time you guys went out there as a technician, so I would definitely recommend that. And then, I think that a lot of the silt fencing and erosion control materials in there aren't doing anything, but he does mention that there's an area where sedimentation is still an issue, and maybe some tree matting should be added to that. So I guess just, making sure that if you remove the silt fencing, it actually isn't functioning. But as Jeff said, Cormac and I met with him earlier today and didn't have a chance to see this, but we'll hopefully meet with him on site as well in the next couple of days as soon as the survey plan is completed.
Yeah, the flags are numbered, so if you do take this out there, you can kind of follow around it and see what's there. So I definitely recommend that. So I guess the action then we're looking to take then is just to simply follow the recommendations of this letter for the erosion control stuff, and then we'll do a site visit on the 4th of August. That would be the one for our next meeting. We'll add it to our field viewing list. And then we'll have all plan in hand, report in hand. We'll have been on site. Silt fencing will be back up and restored to the way it should be, kind of in accordance with this. And then they'll have an idea for plantings and for what they want to do at the end of the culvert. and then we can move through August with some measurable.
There's not a lot of time to get
Correct.
seated in September.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's why it's important and kind of imperative for them to get all that stuff put together by the start of August, because that way if they have to source materials or get plants or do those things, that they have time to do that and get them prior to kind of September.
So we can see it at our next
Yes.
field dealings and really nail this thing at our next meeting.
Correct. And then obviously, then it's just a matter of staying on top of it and getting regular reporting enough to know that the activities have occurred within the time frame that we set forward.
Our intention is to have the plan for you before your site inspection. See what's proposed.
If we get that, Jeff, maybe you could just email it around.
No, as soon as I get it, I'll have it. This one literally came in via email about 2:15. So
Yeah.
at that point, I figured I'd just bring it to the meeting.
Yeah, no, we'll still have time to review this by the next.
Because I'm guessing you guys just don't sit around your computer waiting for emails from me.
Sometimes, some days.
At least I hope not. Other than that, we have our CPC. This one's kind of on the move. Other administrative action that's taking place. You guys will probably, not next week, but hopefully the start of August, when you call the office, especially in the mornings or do things, hopefully a new friendly voice other than mine will be answering the phone. So we've been doing our administrator position interviews this week, and our last two tomorrow. So hopefully we'll have that position offered out by the end of this week and have someone in place as close to the start of August as possible. So
Union-wise, you don't have to re-offer it to Catherine?
no, this is a different kind of position. So it'll probably be someone that, well, I know that the applicants that applied are all new to the town. So, but it'll be good. We'll hopefully have a little better customer service than me trying to be around or trying to juggle a million things.
I think that'd be
So-
really good.
Mm-hmm.
You know that.
So
Good.
keep that in mind. Other than that, I don't think I have anything else really Conservation Commission wise from my end.
Well, that's it then, huh? We'll have a motion to adjourn. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Stick around. We're leaving. Okay, that motion carries unanimously.